The late summer of 1969 hung thick with a sense of unease. Los Angeles had always been a city of dreams, but recently it had turned into something far darker. Whispers of missing persons, unsolved crimes, and a strange sense that something sinister was brewing just beneath the surface. I had been working long nights with missing persons reports that seemed to multiply by the day. Some were runaways, others simply vanished, as if the city had swallowed them whole. One case stood out above the rest. A young woman, Abigail Folger, the heiress to the Folger coffee fortune, hadn't been seen for days. Her boyfriend, Wojciech Frykowski, had also gone missing. The LAPD had been reluctant to jump to conclusions, but I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. I followed up on the leads, tracing their last known whereabouts to a lavish estate in the Hollywood Hills, a place that shimmered with the glamour of the rich and famous. Yet, something was off. The address was 10,050 Cielo Drive, a secluded property rented by Roman Polanski, the acclaimed film director. His wife, Sharon Tate, was 8 months pregnant, an actress known for her beauty and grace. She, too, had seemingly disappeared. As I made my way up the winding driveway, the eerie silence pressed in. The house loomed ahead, bathed in the soft glow of the California sun, but it felt wrong, too still, too quiet. When I pushed through the gate, I saw it. Red letters smeared on the front door, a grotesque message scrawled in blood. The word pig glistened on the door, sending a shiver down my spine. I drew my weapon, heart racing, and pushed inside. The scene inside was beyond anything I had ever witnessed. The floor was stained crimson, the walls spattered with violence, and the air itself seemed to hum with the memory of terror. Sharon Tate lay in the middle of the room, her white dress soaked in blood. Her arms were bound with a rope, one end wrapped around the body of Jay Sebring, her friend and a famous hairstylist, lying dead beside her. The brutality of the murders was unlike anything I had seen in my years as a detective. As I stood there, my mind racing to comprehend the carnage, I noticed details that struck me as strange. The victims had been stabbed multiple times, with no apparent motive beyond sheer savagery. It was clear that whoever had done this had intended not just to kill, but to send a message. I looked closer at the word on the door. Pig. What did it mean? The investigation took on a life of its own as we discovered more bodies outside. Abigail Folger, sprawled on the lawn, her white nightgown soaked in blood, her boyfriend Wojciech Frykowski lying nearby. Both had been stabbed repeatedly, far more times than necessary to kill. Another victim, Stephen Parent, had been shot in his car at the bottom of the driveway, seemingly at random. The city of Los Angeles descended into a state of panic. The press hounded the department, hungry for answers, but the truth was elusive. I spent countless hours poring over witness statements, forensic reports, and following every lead, but nothing added up. There were no obvious suspects, no personal vendettas, and no rational explanation for the horror that had unfolded at Cielo Drive. Then, the letters began to appear, cryptic messages sent to the LAPD, referencing a group, an ideology, something more sinister than any lone killer. A web of connections started to form, and the pieces slowly fell into place. There were rumors about a cult, an off-the-grid group, living in isolation in the California desert. People whispered about them in hushed tones, speaking of strange beliefs, drugs, and a charismatic leader who had a hold over his followers. Following up on these whispers, I drove out to Spahn Ranch, a decrepit movie set turned commune. The place was crawling with drifters, hippies, and lost souls, all seemingly entranced by the aura of one man. Charles Manson. The name made my skin crawl, and I had yet to even see him. But the more I dug, the more everything seemed to lead back to Manson and his ragtag group of followers. Manson had a vision, I learned. He believed he was some kind of prophet, destined to ignite a race war he called Helter Skelter. The murders at Cielo Drive, I realized, weren't just random acts of violence. They were part of a twisted philosophy, an attempt to frame the killings as the start of some imagined revolution. As I gathered more evidence, the pieces began to fall into place. The day after the murders at Cielo Drive, another massacre had taken place in Los Feliz. Lino and Rosemary LaBianca had been stabbed to death in their home, similarly brutalized. The same word, pig, had been written on their walls in blood. It was clear now that the murders were linked, and Manson's followers were behind it all. With the case building, we brought in Manson and several of his followers for questioning. They were eerily calm, as if none of the bloodshed affected them. Susan Atkins, one of Manson's loyal followers, eventually confessed to the murders, describing in chilling detail how they had broken into Sharon Tate's home, how they had tied her and her friends up, and how they had systematically butchered them, all under Manson's orders. I still remember the moment when Atkins casually mentioned Tate, begging for the life before they stabbed her. The callousness in her voice sent a chill through me that I will never forget. Charles Manson never wielded the knife himself, but his influence was undeniable. He had orchestrated it all, a twisted puppet master, pulling the strings of those too lost to see the evil in his words. The case was solved, but the horror of what I had uncovered lingered in the air like a curse. In the end, the victims of the Manson family murders were as follows. Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, stabbed 16 times. Jay Sebring, her friend, shot and stabbed. Abigail Folger and her boyfriend Wojciech Frykowski, both brutally stabbed to death. And Stephen Parent, a young man in the wrong place at the wrong time. The next night, Lino and Rosemary LaBianca were also slain, their deaths equally senseless and brutal. Manson and his followers were eventually convicted, but the shadow of their crimes still hangs over the city. I sometimes wonder how many more lives could have been lost if we hadn't put the pieces together when we did. This case was unlike anything I had ever seen, a convergence of madness, manipulation, and murder. And though the case is closed, the horror remains.